Hello. I didn't see you there. I'm Megan Hanks, and I'm here to talk to you about the AP US history time periods. Our first time period begins with the Clovis people. They are the earliest known native tribe living in North America. Some of the other tribes in North America are the Navajo and Asazi, Mound Builders, Pueblo people, Aztec, Mayan, Inca, the tribes of the Mississippi, the tribes of the Pacific Coast, and the tribes of the Atlantic Coast. The Aztec, Mayan, and Inca were the three strongest empires of all time in America. All of these tribes relied on either hunting or food, or growing it themselves. The earliest signs that archaeologists have of native people living in the Americas is around 13,000 years ago, which are the Clovis people. It's very interesting to learn about this. Come stay a little while, have a seat, and we can learn a lot more about American history. Master of Genocide, Christopher Columbus.
Hello, I'm Christopher Columbus and am a European explorer that sailed from Spain to the Caribbean and then to America. Although I didn't know where I was going, I sailed for over 2 months across the ocean. I was the first European to make contact with North America, the New World. I was originally trying to find a new route to India for trading. When I first arrived in America, I thought it was India, and that's why Native Americans are sometimes referred to as Indians.
India! At last! I have found it!
Hello again. Columbus and his crew's first encounters with the natives were peaceful, even though they didn't speak the same language. But then they decided it would be a good idea to enslave a ton of natives and bring them back as slaves to Europe. They did this instead of bringing back gold because they couldn't find any in America. Spaniards started to conquer land in Mexico and Peru. They were called conquistadors. People protested against this. One of the more famous protesters was Bartolomé de las Casas. He wrote and kept a record of the natives' lives and how they were treated unjustly.
The Columbian Exchange was a big part of early America and affected what resources were where in the world. It was the exchange of animals, plants, and diseases across the ocean between the Native Americans, the European explorers, and Africa. Some of the exchanged items were corn, tomatoes, lemons, potatoes, oats, and more. In 1607, the first colony was founded in America. It was called Jamestown and was founded by the English. Some of the other colonies that were founded were Virginia, Plymouth, New Haven, New York, Maryland, and Bermuda. They were different in their religion, government, and specific crop they produced. The two most common religions in the colonies were Anglican and Puritan. Some colonies didn't have a religion at all. The main governments in the colonies were corporation, royal, and proprietary. Some of the crops that were grown were tobacco, sugar, and rice. Some colonies also fished and traded. Natives and Europeans started to have conflicts rise between them. The Pico War was an early sign of major conflict that would happen between the natives and Europeans in the New World. There were a couple of other battles like this one, but later they break out into full-scale war that ends with many lives lost on both sides, but we'll talk about that later. The war known as the French and Indian War in America and the 7 Years' War in Britain was one of the first major wars in America. It was Britain against Spain and France, with Native American allies on both sides. The outcome of the war was that the British and their allies won. The impact of the French and Indian War was that Britain won control over all of French Canada. The Treaty of Paris ended the war in 1763. Fun fact, the song Yankee Doodle was inspired by the war. The Revolutionary War happened because the colonists in America rebelled against England and refused to be under their rule anymore. The war lasted a total of 8 years, from 1775 to 1783. There were many battles fought in the Revolutionary War. The outcome of the war was that the colonists won, and the impact of the war is that the colonists gained their freedom and were able to start their own country. And if you think about it, we might still be under the rule of the crown today if the colonists had not rebelled against them back then. The ratio of the total black population to free blacks was changing in the southern states during this time. The South was growing crops on a larger scale, so they needed more human labor to happen. They thought the most logical thing to do would be to enslave people of African descent and use them to do labor for free. The slave trade happened through the Triangle Trade, where in Africa, slaves would be uncomfortably packed into ships and sent to America to be purchased. Parties in free America battled over the economy and federal power in the U.S. government. Federalists wanted a strong federal government and believed in a loose interpretation of the Constitution. Democratic Republicans believed in a weak federal government, giving more power to the people, and in a strict interpretation of the Constitution. The Federalist Party died out as white male suffrage spread across states. The Democratic-Republican Party gained greater political influence with Thomas Jefferson's election of 1800. The Whig Party emerged in 1834 as an opponent to President Andrew Jackson's tyrannical views. It was short-lived, but left its mark in American history. During Jefferson's administration, the U.S. purchased the Louisiana Territory from France in 1803. The land bought was about 827,000 square miles west of the Mississippi. The newly acquired territory made it possible for westward expansion and influenced the idea of manifest destiny.
The Lowell system was a model for the textile industry in the U.S. that employed women and children. The Lowell system influenced the textile industry in America significantly by making manufacturing textile quicker and led to the Industrial Revolution.
With the textile industry booming, there was a greater demand for cotton to be produced. The plantations in the South that grew cotton relied heavily on the labor of human slaves. In order to keep up with this demand for cotton, slavery expanded immensely, and the practice of slavery became a political affair. One example of how slavery became a political affair is the Missouri Compromise. It was created to keep a balance of power between slave states and free states as tensions grew between pro-slavery and anti-slavery individuals in Congress and throughout the U.S.
The Gold Rush. First trace of gold was found in California in 1848. News of gold quickly spread across the nation, and many migrated west to mine in hopes to strike it rich.
Division between slave states, which were in the South, and free states, which were in the North, led to social and political tensions. Now that slavery was a relevant topic in the federal government by the 1850s, geographical separations between the North and the South were made. The rise of the Republican Party emerged in the 1850s as a political force to oppose the expansion of slavery into the Nebraska territories. Abraham Lincoln was first elected as the first Republican president in 1860. This angered Southerners because they saw Lincoln's election as a threat to their economic prosperity. By President Lincoln's inauguration, 7 pro-slavery states had already seceded from the United States. More would soon secede as well. These rebel states called themselves the Confederate States of America.
Civil War broke out in 1861. Early stages of the war made the Union hopeful of a short and victorious war. As the war progressed, however, the Confederacy proved to be a tough competitor, and the war would be much longer than expected. The Civil War ended in 1865 with a Union victory. The no longer Confederate South was left in ruins after the war. Reconstruction of the South was attempted in numerous ways, but was hardly successful. Industry boomed, and the era of big business and capitalism began. This was called the Gilded Age. Workers' unions, both industrial and agrarian, were created as well. Reconstruction was still happening during this time period. A transcontinental railroad was built and had both positive and a negative impact. A transformation of the West occurred as a result of westward expansion. Many know this as the Wild West.
The war was a series of battles fought between the U.S. against Germany and their allies. Governmental action also took place, such as the birth of the League of Nations and the New Deal. New social ideologies spread amongst society. The United States and Germany later tied a big fat bow to officially end the war. We know that as the Treaty of Versailles.
The Great Depression was not just in the United States, but was in fact a global affair. The Great Depression was caused by war debt from World War I, and it was also caused by a crash in the stock market. By December of 1941, the United States was involved in the Second World War. World War II was caused by the strike on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese and the declaration of war on Nazi Germany. The United States suffered from the difficulty of keeping the nation together caused by the idea of isolationism. The war involved the Axis powers, which included Germany, Italy, and Japan, against the Allied powers, US, France, and Britain. During the war, new technologies such as the atomic bomb surfaced. Politics played a major role as FDR sought to create a better nation.
In this time period, we noticed the change in American national identity, politics and power, work exchange, and technology. The Vietnam War confronted the divide between communist nations and democratic nations. Many civil rights movements appeared, such as women's rights in the 60s and 70s. And can we just talk about the Cold War? The Cold War was a major event. TV influenced and sparked many opinions across the nation. Reagan. The Reagan administration stood on mostly foreign policy. He was involved in the U.S. military actions during 9/11 and the war between Iraq and Afghanistan. This isn't all. The United States suffered from a major financial crisis in 2008.